My name is Craig Picken. I'm an executive recruiter. More than a decade ago, I started my practice for one purpose: to use my experience as a former military aviator, business jet sales executive, and P&L leader to help aviation and aerospace companies and their executives be fast, adaptable, and strategic. I do these podcasts to inspire and inform, but more importantly, they are a focused platform to help business leaders grow. Welcome to the Aerospace Executive Podcast. Hey, welcome back to the Aerospace Executive Podcast. I'm really happy to have Roger Raley and Joe DeCruz with me. They're with Alpine Advanced Materials down in Dallas. Alpine is a early stage venture capital backed company that's making highly engineered composite components for aerospace. And hey guys, welcome. Tell me about what you're doing. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, no, thanks for having us, Craig. I'll start. So with Alpine Advanced Materials, we're a subsidiary of Catalyze Dallas Holdings, and Joe can tell you a little bit more about the Catalyze model and how they brought the technology to commercialization. But what Alpine does is we design and manufacture purpose-built parts for high reliability, harsh environment applications. So think about aircraft, space, defense industry. Those are all core vertical markets for us.
I got to think in today's day and age, obviously the commercial side, we're talking about what's the go-to-market strategy? What are you thinking about? I mean, obviously, composite material right now is getting a lot of focus.
Yep.
Strength, weight, a lot of benefits there. Corrosion issues, a lot of stuff. What's where are you seeing the future? What is it? The OEM market, the military market, airlines, commercial airlines, everybody?
Really all the above. So we saw problems, and two of the big problems that you talked about, weight. Everything's trying to get lighter, faster. You can carry more payload, carry more passengers. Corrosion resistance is a big problem that we've solved, and then also strength. So when you look at HX5, it's 93% the strength of 6061 aluminum at about half the weight. And there's a lot of versatility with the material. It can be coated, it can be EMI shielded. It has some natural EMI shielding capabilities already inherently in it. It's just a perfect material to replace 6061 aluminum.
Yeah, and the market's changed a little bit this year, with COVID and the 90% of the fleet being grounded. And as they started bringing up the recovery, especially out of Europe, focused on carbon and carbon reduction, we layered on top of what we were doing with Alpine traditionally, and built some relationships, looking for the carriers that had the balance sheet that was good, and senior executives that would lean forward on looking at innovative things to try and leapfrog the market when it came out. So as part of that, we did a white paper that reflected both of the catalyzed companies, both Alpine and Metro, and how we enhance and accelerate the reduction of carbon as the planes re-enter the service. And so we've done a pretty extensive report on that. It went to Environmental Defense Fund, who has taken that to the EPA as they're looking to do their new regulations, right, for carbon reduction. They're trying to set some new limits. And that's also been translated over to ICAO in Europe. So we're seeing some good positive benefits in that. It's good in that both the catalyzed companies have a direct impact on that. As we look at, Roger's not there yet, but we've got two grandkids, Christian and I, and we want to make sure that they have a decent place to be when they grow up, and they can still enjoy Texas as Texas and not as a waterfront property.
There you go. So tell me how HX5. How did it come to be? I mean, how did you develop it? How is it different from some of the other carbon?
So I'll take how did it come to be, and I'll let Roger dive in on how it's different. So my wife and I sold our previous startups. She had a software-defined networking company, and I had a encryption company. We sold those back in 2013 and decided we wanted to do something together. But we didn't want to do a back of the napkin startup. So I spent 10 years at DuPont, and in my roles at Nokia and EDS, and her roles at TI and Siemens, we had spun businesses out of the business that were orphaned or technology that really didn't fit our core. Mm-hmm. So we took that same model and founded Catalyze Dallas in 2014. And if you think about the defense industry back in 2014, they were trying to do some spin outs and failing pretty miserably. Mm-hmm. And we happened to be in the right place at the right time. We were able to get an audience with Lockheed and become a partner with them, and have been a partner with them since 2014, helping them to analyze and understand their IP and what would be have commercial viability, which is what our expertise is. So HX5 is a material I first saw that in Palmdale in 2014, and thought it had real merit. And so we built a relationship with Lockheed. They asked us to help them out of a bind with the microvane technology that is the foundational product for Metro Aerospace. Mm-hmm. And they asked us to do that first and then move into Apex. So we were patient, probably more patient than anyone else that had seen that material. And we were able to close that transaction 5 years later in January of 2019. And it was great because we had a great relationship with the CTO at Lockheed and the president of Skunk Works, Rob Weiss, and Kobe Jackson, CTO, who really wanted to leverage their $50 million investment into this material and actually get benefit out of it. And they felt that we could penetrate Lockheed's different programs faster and finalize the material for commercial use cheaper and faster. And I think we've proven that over the past 12 months.
So you talk about Prepreg carbon fiber that a lot of people laying down sheet on sheet, and is yours much more of a, I know you do, you provide a lot of recipes and then it goes to some contract manufacturers.
Let me qualify that. We do not give our recipe. Okay. So it's a great secret. We have a pretty tight control over the manufacturing of the material. What we do is we hold all the material, inventory here or at our other warehouse, at our partner, and then we ship it directly to the plants that are going to manufacture for us. Mm-hmm. And then we control that. We're on site for the quality because this material is different than any other in how it performs and how it's manufactured or used to manufacture parts. And then we bring all the excess and the purged material back here to either regrind or dispose of.
So HX5, but it's an extruded. You can create parts in a couple different ways. They can be extruded like a plastic extrusion, or I guess they can come out in like a block, and then you can machine it using 5-axis or something. Or how do parts all come together?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different ways, and this is where HX5 is different. It's injection molded, so design a tool for whatever that part is, and then you inject. It comes in a pelletized form naturally, so then you run it through the hopper and in through an injection molding machine, and you injection mold whatever those parts are. It's the cool thing about that, especially when you compare it to aluminum, is you can make hundreds of parts a day versus hundreds of parts in months or even years. So the volume manufacturing is a big selling point, but it can also be extruded. So you can run those pellets through an extrusion die and create long parts that you can either machine down or cut down into other shapes. The cool thing about HX5, and you hit on it, it machines exactly like metal. So any existing CNC machine without additional capital equipment involved, you can take a piece of HX5 and machine it down into whatever that shape is that you want, and that helps us get really tight tolerances in places where you normally couldn't do that with other materials.
Where do you see the, obviously, in the commercial biz app side of the house, BGA, you've got FAA issues. Military side, a little bit less. You've just got engineering design, mil spec. What parts do you see, where do you see it going in the airplanes? You've got the micro vanes on some airplanes. Where do you see it going into the airplane? How's the FAA? How's the FAA treating it, in the military, and how's it being perceived in the market?
Yeah, so cabins and interiors are really a prime spot for us. So if you think about everything, I brought one in here to show you from, a seat arm on an airplane to tray tables, to latches, to slides. Some of the partners that we're working with today are subcontractors to the industry. And so like your alma mater, Gulfstream, for example, you can, any amount of weight you can take out of that plane, it allows you to either add another passenger or extend the range, or add more payload if you want to. And so we're working with their subcontractors to design products and manufacture products that can go into those aircraft that can lightweight the cabins. So that's a perfect application. Defense, we're installed in the UH-60 Whiskey in an enclosure for avionics. Where we took an existing design that was made out of metal, and we took half the weight out of it, but at the same time, we were also able to take some fans out of it where it had active cooling and made passive cooling, and basically really lightweighted that enclosure for that piece of equipment.
Yeah, that's one of the things we liked about HX5, because being able to, as we looked at extracting this, it had mill certs because it was originally designed for the F-35. Mm-hmm. So it was originally designed for a wingtip application that was pretty critical, and they couldn't find any material that would satisfy it. But one of the interesting components as we looked at evaluating does this technology fit our model was that it had mill certs on UAVs, helicopters, the jet fighter, missile platforms, satellites, and underwater platforms. Mm-hmm. So it had mill certs across the board. One of the few thermoplastics that passed the Navy burn test for submarines. And so that was all promising information that we felt we could translate to FAA certification, because we had done that with Metro. We took Metro Aerospace's mill cert data and quickly got an STC through the FAA in about 6 months.
Interesting. And they liked it. Yeah. So you think about, go back to the Gulfstream thing, you talk about cabinets, so they're all honeycomb.
Right.
Can you, but they're very labor intensive. Can you start to, can you go so far as to say, hey, look, we can, replace honeycomb cabinets, put very nice veneer on them and machine it very easily for install and take a lot of the labor out of it? Things like, can you go so far as to create just about any product out there that you need for, obviously anything, flight structures related might be on the wing or the airfoil might start to be an issue, but on an interior, I got to think there's a gajillion different ways that you can.
There's a ton of different ways. And it really comes down to, size at some point, because when you injection mold, there are some limits, and they're pretty far out there in terms of, what you can injection mold, but that's really going to be the limitation. And the other cool thing about it, and not to keep showing samples, but the material can be coated extremely well. So this is a brushed nickel, for example, over HX5. You wouldn't know that this is a thermoplastic. And so again, for the aircraft where you have aesthetics and things inside of it that need to be plated, you could plate it in gold, you could plate it in really any metal that you want to. You can create a really cool looking part to replace, I guess, like you said, just about anything in the aircraft.
How's the reception? You've got it up at Sikorsky, obviously Lockheed Martin. You've got your board of advisors is not short of any horsepower there. You've got some very talented people in the industry there.
Yeah.
How's the
Yeah.
reception been at the various OEMs and the suppliers?
So one of the, I'll let Roger kind of dive into our how we've been accepted, but one of the things that's really helped our reach is not only our board of advisors, but our investors are pretty prominent people, and some of them very prominent in the commercial aerospace sector. So they've helped to open doors and also add credibility to the fact that, you know, most people look at us. Our first conversations when I started talking to customers, you know, the big Safrans of the world, the Boeings of the world, et cetera, and Airbus about what we're doing and what the material is. The first comment was, well, come back to me in a couple of years when you've got the first customers and you're no longer a startup. And my first comment back was, well, here's what I'm doing on these platforms. Here's the part. What part of startup does this not fit? And so that's really helped us go fast and seed the groundwork for what Roger and his team has been doing.
What's your cost to prototype a part? I mean, if you want to go to Gulfstream or Textron or Sikorsky or something and say, hey, look, we're going to bring this up to you. We're going to prototype it. We're going to show you the advantages. I mean, is it cost prohibitive? Is it relatively inexpensive? Can you do that 10 different times? And is that that's got to be a pretty good selling point for you, I think.
Yeah, it really depends. If they're looking for, true prototypes of an exact part, that could be a little costlier, but if they're just looking for mechanical samples, just to compare weight and not necessarily the full strength characteristics, we can do that pretty quickly. So it really depends on the size of the part and how complex it is. But getting prototypes in customer hands is critical because they want to see something that looks and feels cool. But we've got tons of samples that we can send out right away, and that helps us really open the doors. But going back to the adoption question, we've been well received because of what the material can do. Now, converting people from traditional aluminum manufactured parts to something that's more cutting edge has been an interesting conversation. But the companies that are innovative, disruptive, look at some of the emerging technologies in drones or in urban air mobility. Those are perfect applications for us, and they want to move quickly. So, getting into those innovation centers within these, even within a large prime like a General Dynamics, getting into their innovation center has helped us move very quickly.
You're a small company now. How fast can you scale it? I mean, or can you do what you're doing from a small platform with lots of manufacturing partners?
So Tricia and I mentality is, coming out of TI and DuPont and some of the other things, our experiences, we're very much focused on capital light startups. So no sense wasting our capital on building equipment or factories, because there's plenty of 3D printing companies out there and injection molding and extrusion companies. And what we do is we partner with them to basically be a premium sales channel for them. Mm-hmm. But how we scale, Tricia and I have scaled startups and big businesses pretty quickly. And what we do is we really focus on fundamentals and focus on keeping the team lean, making sure you've got the right culture of a startup. I'm an old ball player, so I always use the baseball vernacular, and you got to have a team. Everyone's on the bus. You may be in different seats at any one point, but we're all going in one direction, right? And so that, I think, has really helped us translate to scaling our businesses very quickly.
Yeah, just to add a couple of things to that. So, when you look at the source of supply for our raw material, it's not unobtainium per se. It's something that we can readily get. Our manufacturer for the raw material can produce as much as we need, in effect. And then when we're producing parts, talking about that variable manufacturing model that we have manufacturers all over the country that have various levels of scale, various levels of ratings, right? Some of our customers have to have an ITAR rated supplier. So we've got a really nice variable supply chain on the execution part. The other point I would make about our material, from soup to nuts to a produced part, it's all domestically sourced. which is a big selling point, particularly for the defense industry.
How does your revenue model work? You've got subcontractors. You don't license the tech, you keep the recipe, you just pay them by the part? Is that kind of how, yeah, hey, look, Sikorsky needs, 1,000 of these things for the H60 whiskey over the next 10 years, produce it, we'll pay you, we keep, just an equal manufacturing partners.
Yeah, exactly. From a manufacturing standpoint, when we're using our subcontractors, it's two things: it's time and labor, right? We supply the material, manufacture parts, and then we manage the supply chain to the end customer. How's COVID? Obviously the last 12 months of you guys early stage startup, is it giving you some gray hairs, or has it been relatively benign?
From the Catalyze perspective, it's been a great year with challenges. So, our Metro Aerospace business is obviously impacted the most because it's a majority of it is foreign military sales.
Yeah.
And you've got to go shake the flesh and meet with the generals in their facilities overseas. And obviously with the lockdown, we couldn't do a lot of travel. Plus the big platforms we target there, the C-17 and the C-130, those fleets have been at 100% utilization over the past year, dealing with COVID relief and medical transport and food transport and all this other stuff. So that really impacted that business, but it still maintained a good trajectory, right? So we saw a downturn, but in sales, but our demand curve is still high. So as things open up, we're getting orders again. So we're confident and bullish on that business. Alpine, I'll let Roger dive into that, but from a corporate holdings perspective, it's been great for Catalyze because as people have seen our model work on Alpine and Metro, we're getting more, we've been approached by more defense contractors to ask us if we could help them do the same thing we're doing for Lockheed, and even expand it even more. So what we're seeing is a much more open approach from some of the senior executives at these defense contractors to not just look at orphan business units, but also look at underperforming business units, and more importantly, some of their strategic technology that they have to develop. Mm-hmm. We've kind of sold them on our approach of, spin it out. It's the telecom model from the 90s. Spin it out, we'll take it, we use our capital to accelerate it. We're going to do it in a third the time and probably a third the capital that it would take you to do it. And then you'll either be able to repurchase the company from us mm-hmm. at a predefined level, or we'll give you'll be the sole distribution channel back into the military.
But you mentioned you're asset light, a little bit ago, and
we're capital light.
Capital light. Okay. Capital light. Yeah. What about so you're getting a lot of demand. What about engineering?
We have great engineering. So we've got probably one of the best engineering teams in the marketplace right now. And then just because we're in Dallas, and the reason we stayed in Dallas is mm-hmm. we have a broad access to folks that have worked for both my wife and I over the past 30 years. So we have elastic engineering firms already set up to offload certain things as we have the spikes in demand. Mm-hmm. And then once we get to a certain point where the spikes are constant, we'll bring people in.
I was going to ask you, do you have to keep a team of engineers on staff, or can you outsource it to like the Belcans of the world and some of the other, the other engineering companies that you partner up with on a project basis?
Our key people are all employees.
Yeah.
How many employees?
We're under 50 still, but we expanded this year actually. So going back to the COVID question, we actually kind of had 3 Black Swan events. We had 737 MAX, which slowed the industry down. Then we had COVID, which slowed everything down. And then you had an election cycle, which created some angst around, what was going to happen, right? So 3 challenges. I was listening to something with Lou Holtz the other day. And he says, look, I go into a season knowing that I'm going to have 3 catastrophes happen. And right. Once one happens, the good news is there's only 2 left. So.
Yeah, when the third one's done, it's blue skies ahead, right? I think we can all look forward to 2020. So it's all.
And so it actually, in some ways, helped us because it allowed us to really prove out our operations, our processes. We've added people to the business in terms of marketing, engineering, and business development. So, being an early stage company, being flexible and really resilient has been the good story coming out of COVID for us.
What's
Yeah, and
the,
I'll expand on that a little bit. We just got done our investor meeting. And one of the things that's unique about Catalyze is, so we've got about 30 large single family and multifamily offices that bought a very small percentage of Catalyze, mainly for a very qualified pipeline. Our pipeline tends to be extremely qualified as opposed to a lot of the pipelines they're looking at from investments, right, in the alternative space. And so what that helps us do is go fast. So for Alpine, we raised 100% of what they needed in less than 30 days. Just right at the beginning of the pandemic, we closed. So, and then we had a lot of oversubscription. But what that does is it allows us to scale quickly and fund future developments that Roger has. But, and we were, what's the word I'm looking for? They reaffirmed their desire to write checks to us after the investment because we had doubled the size of Alpine. The trajectory, well, yeah, you've got commercial aerospace shifting to the right, but we backfilled and we were able to pivot, stay under our budget significantly, and just control our costs while still gaining all this extra traction.
Yeah. You guys must be like the mayor of Highland Park down there or something with all the. What's the challenges? I mean, is it patient money? I mean, 30 investors. I got to think, hey, look, if it's 30 family offices, et cetera, patient money. What do they want to see?
All patient money. Yeah, one of the things we're different than a VC or private equity. So we're, Catalyze Dallas is. We've been told by some of our big PE investors that we're kind of a new model. Because we do not have a time horizon. Our background, Tricia and I are operators, right? So we've run billion-dollar P&Ls for public companies and taken small companies public. Our belief is you build a business that's sustainable, that delivers better than industry average EBITDA, and you build it to run long-term. And there'll be a point at some time in the future where we've got enough traction and we've made enough noise in the marketplace where somebody big is going to come acquire us. But what we sold to our investors is that model. We are not going to be forced to sell early because somebody's time horizon is on the end, because you never make the appropriate money. So we vet our investors as much as they vet us.
Interesting. It's a great, I mean, I got to think, you're CTO Lockheed Martin. I got to think those guys are like, hey, what do we need to do to buy you out? I got to assume some bigger PE groups are circling the wagons, or at least your phones are ringing.
Well, I think they're starting to see us because, Catalyze is, number one, we pulled Roger out of Berkshire Hathaway. So that, prickled some feathers on some necks. But Catalyze is one of Ellen Lord's first trusted capital partners. And I'm on the Benz Competitive Council, which is the whole power competition between our near peers. So what's happened is our presence is elevated. And so, when we're on calls with Cerberus and Carlisle, they're like, tell us more about your model. So it's been fun. It's been interesting. It's not something we actually looked at trying to create a demand signal from private equity, but we have one of the, kind of Texas Hall of Famers in private equity is an investor here and has really helped with a number of things. And he's been thoroughly impressed. Interesting.
Now, Roger, you came over from TTI.
Correct.
Berkshire, how are you finding the small, a lot of people, they have a, not that TTI was a big company, but a lot of people struggle going from the GEs, the Honeywells, the Pratt and Whitneys. How's your transition been to a 50-person company, and what do you find? And this is something a lot of people need to know about. What advice would you give to somebody thinking about, hey, we're a small investor-owned, early stage company?
Do it. That's the easiest advice I could give. But yeah, TTI, a $6 billion company, globally well run, part of Berkshire Hathaway. I learned a tremendous amount, working for that organization. But the key reasons why I left were I wanted to jump into something that that I had more skin in the game on, that was innovative, that was growing quickly, and that I could really, put my brand onto, my personal, brand from a leadership standpoint. And this checked all the boxes. The material was kind of the first thing, but then, moving to a company that you can really, sink your teeth into and lead and grow. And it's been a tremendous experience. And
What was the biggest challenge? What was the biggest challenge? All of a sudden now you're walking in.
Probably me.
Navigating Joe. Yeah. Navigating through, the pandemic and other things, I guess, would have been the biggest challenge. But, from that standpoint, I can't say that we've had, a challenge that's that big yet. It's, the way that I, personally kind of operate, and I don't get too high or too low. So, when challenges are in front of us, you figure out how to get, through them, over them, around them. And, we fortunately hadn't had a major challenge that I'd say is a roadblock.
Yeah, Trish and I have gone through the telecom bust, the 2008. I went through the 80s recession. So we've seen it, been there, done that. So I think what helps our companies is at the parent level, we just don't overreact. We know what's going on. So what we do is we focus on where's the opportunity. Where is the opportunity to partner with the right companies that have the right balance sheet, that have the right leadership that wants to lead forward. And that is something we really focused on in the meat of the pandemic for all the companies. And I think that helped, level the water.
How are you getting the word of mouth out to, once again, not a lot of people, a big sales force. You're walking into the vice president of procurement at Textron Aviation. You're going, boy, have I got something for you? How's that been? How's that conversation been going?
It's actually been great. Joe talked about it earlier, getting out in front of people and being able to walk in with material and show them what we can do, face to face is huge for us, whether it's going to a customer site or going to a conference where, you get all these people together. Unfortunately, this year we didn't have that opportunity. So we really cranked up our marketing engine in terms of social media, in terms of branding our material and putting the capabilities out there, and personally reaching out to those decision makers. So, in some ways, it was a lot easier to connect with them, this year, because it's really focused, really tight one-on-one communications. And when you get somebody, on a screen, it's hard for them to look at their phone or do other things. And
the Zoom world, everybody, I hear all the doom and gloomers say, business travel is going to be cut by 30% permanently.
No, it's not.
I'm like, please, no, it's not.
In January.
The best day of my life will be the day I can give up my Zoom subscription. That's why I get back on an airplane. That's kind of what I tell people. But one thing you guys are really doing right, and I love it. Can I mention some of the, you've got, on your board of advisors, he's on your website. So you got a guy like Ed Delansky on there. Ed's a phenomenal guy. I was on the phone with him and Pat Walsh, who was working with Ed up at Boeing, Admiral Pat Walsh, and a couple of phenomenal people. You've got the former CTO of Lockheed Martin on there. You're really doing it right from getting the board of advisors on there. And do you think companies do that type of due do they do that enough? You know, you think about where you guys are at your stage and you're really saying, hey, look, what do we need to do to be successful? And it's not what, it's really who do we need to connect with to be successful? How's the board of advisors helping you out?
So Trish and I, multiple startups and multiple board of advisors over our careers. What we didn't want, we hadn't really seen a good board of advisors and how they worked. So when we sat down with Dr. Bobby Lyle, who's our lead investor and basically the chairman of the board for Catalyze, we sat down and said, we want to have a board of advisors, but we want to have people that are engaged. We want to have people that are invested in our success and that they benefit from our success.
Mm-hmm.
So we really focused as we don't just take anybody on our board of advisors. We really look at what area on the board do we have a gap, or what area do we have a gap in the markets we're going to penetrate. And then we go and actively look for people that can fill that role from the people that we know and the people that our investors know and the people that are what we call our friends at Catalyze. So we have a pretty extensive friends at Catalyze network that are former CEOs and CTOs and undersecretaries, et cetera, and generals. And obviously you mentioned one, Pat, who's been a good friend. So we get insight into some really good quality people, and having, Frank Capuccio, Heidi Shu, Dr. Lyle on the board really opens the door.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no doubt.
And they're very active. Some of them we talk to on a weekly basis, even though they only committed to a very short period of time. What we found is our board of advisors, unlike most, they are actively engaged. They're calling us, hey, I just ran into this person. I really want to connect you. Here's how I set it up. Ed, so Ed is always out there positioning, right?
Yep.
So he's been a great ad, and we're super happy about that.
Yeah, and that's helped us open a lot of doors on the Alpine side.
Yeah. So what's when we're running up about 40 minutes here. What keeps you scared? What keeps you scared so that you're continually moving forward? And at what point do you say, man, this has been, we're thrilled with where we're at? What's the final goal?
Yeah, I don't know that I've ever looked and said I'm thrilled with where I'm at. And I personally have a natural kind of instinct to look over my shoulder a little bit. So what keeps me up at night is, again, just continuing to drive and grow. And how do we overcome, whatever those small obstacles are and move the business forward, every day. That's what wakes me up in the morning. But it's, like I said, it's been fun. It's exciting. It's innovative. There's really not anything that, I'm looking at saying, hey, I'm really fearful if this happens, then, how does that affect the business? We take those as they come.
Yeah, for me, I think, Trish and I started this company with the goal that, people love what they do. They want to be at work. They want to be with their peers. You basically create a secondary family, right? And so we love what we're doing. And, as I've told my wife, I don't see me stopping until I die, because I love this thing so much. It's the art of the chase, right? It's the art of the deal. But if something was keeping me up, it would be worried that something caused a rift in the culture and the feeling that this is a family. So we have gone, I think we've tried to make sure that everyone feels very engaged, included, and part of the team.
Yeah. Awesome. Let's do this. Let's call it here. But you guys got to promise to come back next in the spring with an update
we'd love to.
and tell us how you're doing with the technology and the market and where it's all going post-COVID. How's that sound?
Either that or we'll come down and play golf down in Wilmington.
There you go. You got the beach right here, so it's all good. But Thanks for coming on, Joe DeCruz with Catalyze Dallas and Roger Raley with Alpine Advanced Materials. Thanks for coming on, guys. Appreciate you.
Thanks a lot, Craig. Have a good holiday.
You too. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed the latest edition of the Aerospace Executive Podcast. You can reach out to me directly, Craig at northstaresg.com, or check us out at www.northstaresg.com. You can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Podbean, or on YouTube. Just do a search for Aerospace Executive Podcast. Thanks again. I'm Craig Piven.